stop.
Yodelele-hee-hoo.
What are you doing?
Yodeling for Yolen. Sule! I think Yolen is the strangest planet in the Cosmere. We've been drip-fed details on this planet of dragons and demons, but the more we learn, the more questions we have. Today, I want to take a real look at Yolen, what we know and what we thought we knew. You might be surprised by what we uncover. Also, a lot of new information came out about Yolen in this summer's release of Isles of the Emberdark, so today's video will contain spoilers for that book. If that's an issue for you, feel free to save this video for later. There will also be minor spoilers for The Sunlit Man. We're trying to get to 5,000 subscribers over here by the end of this year, and so you should hit subscribe. We also have 4 new merch designs on our store right now. Check them out. They're going to be gone by the end of this month. Also, we launched a Patreon this month. If you want access to our exclusive Theory Crafting Discord, you should join below. The only reason we have any information about this planet at all is thanks to the important people who call it home. We know that Hoid is from Yolen, and the planned Dragonsteel series will be his origin story set on that planet. In The Sunlit Man, he reminisces on his time on Yolen to a rather uncaring nomad. From chapter 10, there was a boy once, Wit began, who looked at the stars and wondered if Nomad deliberately turned and walked away. He'd heard far, far too many of this man's stories to care for another. I was that boy, Wit said from behind, when I was young, on Yolen, before all this began, before God died and worlds started ending. I was that boy. Nomad froze, then glanced over his shoulder. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but droplets of it still interrupted Wit's figure. He didn't often speak of his past, of those days long ago. He claimed not to remember much about his childhood, a time spent in a land of dragons and bone-white trees. We also know that the 16 vessels were Yolish as well. This was confirmed in this early words of Brandon. Yolen is also the homeworld to the dragons. The few we know of, Frost, Starling, Coravelium Avast, Medalentorius, and Zeiss's Refliel, as well as all the rest. Not all of these beings were necessarily born before the Shattering, but Yolen is absolutely their home. These creatures are pretty interesting, as they're born human. Sort of. Yeah, so dragons actually have at least 2 forms. They are natural shapeshifters, and thanks to the Isles of the Emberdark prologue, we know that these creatures start their lifespans in their humanoid form. After 30 years in this human form, they can gain their true form as a 4-legged reptilian creature with 2 wings, and sometimes hair. Yeah, these 6-limbed creatures are actually pretty notable for another reason. The 6-limbed creatures of Yolen have a unique classification: the Fane. Fane life refers to the 6-limbed dragons and the other 6-limbed sapient species of Yolen, the Shodel. The Shodel are also humanoid, but they each have 4 arms instead of the normal 2. They also have bone-white skin, much like the other Fane life of Yolen. Remember from that earlier Hoid quote about Yolen being the land of dragons and bone-white trees? It's also notable that Ulida, the vessel of ambition, was a Shodel before Odium splintered her. The intent of ambition was specifically threatening to the intent of Odium, but Ulida was coincidentally the only Shodel vessel that we know of. This might be a connection in some way, but it seems more of a Shardic intent battle rather than a prejudice of race. It's also important to note here that only the 6th-limbed creatures are called the Fane. The original humans of Yolen, on the other hand, are actually classified as the Unfane, and from what we know about Yolen, they have an entirely different ecology. There was one minor detail about the Fane and Unfane revealed in Isles of the Emberdark that's also worth talking about. From Isles of the Emberdark, chapter 40. There were no greater builders in history than the Yolish dragonkind, Dajur said, tapping his pad so an image appeared on his wall screen. The grand ivory city of Larkal, built high along the glittering skyways of Yolen, far above the wild forests. Constructed by her people during their primordial service to Adonalsium, before the rivalry between the Fane and the Unfane, long before she had been born, back before even Master Hoid had been born, when Frost had been a youth. Apparently, at some point before the Shattering, the Fane and the Unfane species of Yolen were cooperative, but something changed that. Something pitted the humans against the Shodel and dragons before Hoid was even born. Could this be the event that led to some of the vessel's dissatisfaction with Adonalsium? And the way Starling is discussing this, it sounds like that rivalry is still active. Interestingly, to that point, we see Frost's priests in the Emberdark prologue. They continue down the corridor, passing more smiling priests, all human, of mixed genders. This is just a passing thought of Starling's, but I believe it's showing us that Frost's priests were exclusively human, at least the ones in this location on Yolen. If there really is a rivalry between the Fane and the Unfane, are these priests actually just indentured servants? How will history paint the good old dragon? Speaking of Emberdark content, I would be remiss if I didn't talk more about Yolen's Perpendicularity, also known as 1/3 of the Silverlight Nexus. One cognitive perpendicularity leading to 3 physical places. One of the places is the Great Star in Yolen, a flying dragon city, but the other 2 are still a mystery. Starling mentions the Yolen point of the Nexus is shrouded and guarded against non-dragons, but the other 2 physical pathways are not. So where could they lead? Well, honestly, we need to understand the Nexus first. The perpendicularity for Yolen realistically can't be one of the shards, thanks to this words of Brandon. I'm assuming this is a construct from before the Shattering, being one of the many manifestations of investiture resulting from Aiden Alcium's presence on the planet. So if this isn't one specific shard's well of power, then where could it lead? Well, honestly, we can't know. Maybe one is Roshar, since this was Aiden Alcium's pet planet, but we only know of 3 perpendicularities there, and they've all been accounted for. Cell wouldn't be an outrageous guess either, as it's a major Cosmere planet with an abundance of magic systems. Or they could very well be planets we haven't seen yet. Maybe one is the mysterious Vax, as it's a planet AT, one of the vessels from Yolen, recognized before passing on. It would make sense for Vax to be connected to Yolen pre-shattering in some way. Maybe it's one of the planets in the Yolish system. At the end of the day, these are really just wild guesses. If only Daughtry had a perpendicularity. Okay, the final thing I need to talk about is something fans keep assuming that is entirely incorrect. It has never once been confirmed that Yolen is where the Shattering happened. No, seriously, go check. I'll wait. We have half a dozen in-fiction references to the vessels from Yolen. Words of Brandon's that tell us Aiden Alcium lived on Yolen, and so many people are saying he was shattered there. But it's not only been conveniently unconfirmed, it's been actively dodged by Brandon. Let's take a look at this. Questioner. With the shards in them kind of splitting pre-Aiden Alcium, was it really shattered on Yolen, or is there a different place? Brandon Sanderson. Well, it gets a little sticky for various reasons, but you can assume that it's a yes, that what it appears to be is correct. Dragonseal in the story of Hoyd takes place on Yolen, but it gets messy because there's some weirdness about the planet. Okay, what? Let me be clear, this isn't a yes. This is a, you can assume you're right until I blow your mind in 10 years. And this is the only time he even comes close to telling us what actually happened at the Shattering. With the power of the dragons, the housing of at least 1 Dawn Shard, the triple perpendicularity, the crazy ecosystem, and the other ecosystem, and Brandon's own confirmations about the insanity of the planet, it is far too early to make any definitive claims about the location of the Shattering. If I know Brandon, and I think I do, this is an intentional subversion to build into a phenomenal Sanderlanche. I think this words of Brandon is a hint that the Nexus connected to Yolen may have something to do with what really happened at the Shattering. And if I'm wrong, then I welcome the roasts. In fact, I would encourage them. But what do you think? Is Vax Aiden Alcium's tomb? Was Daughtry connected to Silverlight? Is Hoyd actually a dragon? Let me know what you think in the comments below.
Real quick, I want to give a very special shout out to our true Lightcaller patrons, Mac, Aquila, and Cobweb. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for the support.
Kolo?